So this morning, our guest is Brendan Hawk. Brendan, would you come on out? Will you give Brendan a hand as he comes out? All right, buddy. All right. Brendan, how old are you?
19.
19 years old, and you're a student at a couple colleges, I understand.
Yeah. I'm a student at University of Toledo, and I'm also a student at North Point Bible College.
So you're doing North Point online, and I guess like everybody is doing college right now, online, and you work?
Yeah, I work at Kroger's, yeah.
At Kroger's, yeah. And some of your family's here today. Anybody you want to say hi to, introduce?
Uncle Al, Allison, Aunt Jerry, Uncle John, Danielle.
All right. Good.
Yep.
Well, Brendan, you've been around this place a long time, and share a little bit about your story, what you want to share, how Christ came to you.
So my story is a little different. It's a little from a different perspective because I've always been here. I didn't really have that come to Jesus moment where I hit rock bottom. I've been coming since I was little. And so my grandparents brought me, and so I grew up I went to the Sunday schools and the Royal Rangers, and I did all that. And I think the biggest impact that church had on me was Royal Rangers. Truthfully, with the Wednesday nights, each week had a different topic, and that's where I learned the foundational truths of what it meant to be a Christian. The Daniel and the lion. Adam and Eve, all that. That's all. I learned that all at Royal Rangers. I also learned about the Christian flag, the Christian pledge. Not many people know about that, but there's a flag. And so one day when I was 8, I decided I was going to ask my grandpa to help me pray and ask Jesus into my heart. And I don't know what made me decide that, but in my 8-year-old brain, I decided that I was going to devote my life to Jesus. And so it wasn't just at church that discipled me. It was also at home. We lived close to my grandparents. We didn't live with them, but we lived close to them. And so their role model, or the way they modeled to me is what it meant to be a Christian. So that's my grandparents, Bill and Ann Liggett. And so some of the things that they taught me, I want to touch on, is they taught me generosity, servanthood, how husbands and wives should treat each other, admiration for God's creation, and solitude. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to touch on each one of those. I have a story for each one of those. So for generosity, if anybody knew my grandmother, she was always shopping, always. You could tell her you needed something, and you didn't even have to be family.
How many of you knew Ann Liggett?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You could tell
my kids got clothes from Ann. She's out shopping when they were little.
Yeah. Anybody could tell her if they expressed a need, she would go get it for you. You didn't have to be blood. It was for everyone. And so, that just her generosity. She just wanted to care for everyone and make sure everyone had what they needed. And for my grandfather, for generosity, I remember sitting in service one day, and he saw a lady that it looked like a single mom, and she was really young, and she had a baby with her. And they talked or whatever, and then eventually he ended up opening his wallet and emptying all the cash out of his wallet and handing it to her. And it didn't come from a place of,
Did that include the emergency 100?
Oh, I'm sure. If it was the cash, he just grabbed it all. And it didn't come from a place of, like stuck-upness or anything. It came from a place of love, and so it didn't, money is just a tool that God has given us and blessed us with to share His word. And then servanthood.
Let me just add the generosity part. I don't want you guys to miss that. We sit in a church today, by and large, in many ways, people like Bill and Ann that were with us at the very beginning when just a handful of us sacrificed immensely to be able to build this. And like I was able to tell your grandpa, until Jesus comes back, this will be dedicated to the Lord, and his generosity was in every area of the church, Some of it I know about, but a lot of it I don't. I still hear stories of your grandma and grandpa doing things on the quiet
Right.
because they didn't care about, in fact, they did not want acknowledged like that, and probably aren't very happy we're talking about it right
Probably
now.
not. Yeah, probably not. Probably not.
But they lived it, they didn't talk about it, for sure.
And then servanthood. If you know them, they were always serving in some sort of capacity, especially cooking. That was kind of my grandma's thing. She cooked for everything, especially the VBS. She was always doing the snacks for the VBS. I don't know, did she have any other roles except cooking at VBS for the snacks? I don't know. But she was always serving. My grandfather always was cooking at the men's breakfasts. And another example, actually I have two more examples of that. And so one, we had that food drive back in 2010 when it was snowing, and there's a picture of him handing out bread in the snow, and I'm sure it was miserable that day. I don't remember it. I was there, but I don't remember it. But it just goes to show that like it didn't matter. It was all about serving. And
I'm
then
going to tell you this.
yeah.
That bread your grandpa's handing out, he bought it,
Oh, I'm sure he did.
half a truckload. Because we had groceries to hand out, and it was 2010, and you guys remember the economy tanked.
Yeah.
And he's like, we've got to do something. And so we took love offerings, we raised money to buy, a whole semi-truckload of food, and he's like, does that include bread? And I'm like, no, they don't have any fresh bread that we get. We can't give people groceries without bread.
Right.
And then a bread truck showed up. The whole truck. Man, yeah, that was great.
And then I have a story about Mrs. Springer. My family may know Mrs. Springer. She was our neighbor for the longest time. She was probably 80 or 90 at the time. And my grandpa had this big Kubota tractor, and it had a plow in the back. And we always plowed with, snow with it. And I remember when I was younger, we would always go over and plow her driveway for her. I don't remember her ever coming and asking. It was just something that he did because he saw someone that had a need and that he could fulfill that need. We'd go over there, shovel her sidewalk, salt everything, plow it. It was just we saw a need and we met it. And it was for no reward. I mean, it was just out of pure love that he felt that he could do that. And then I felt that it was important to add that this next trait, that how husbands and wives should treat each other. I felt that it was important to add that because it's a model for for my future when I have a wife. They modeled that to me and how I'm going to act. And what you do and you don't do. I remember like my grandma was always shopping, and so when she would come home, I remember multiple occasions where we would be standing out in the driveway because he's always in the yard, and he would say, he would be like, oh, I love that woman, or that's the love of my life, and she didn't hear it because, she was driving, and so it's just things like that, or, he'd help her put her socks on, or whatever, if she had a need, he would meet the need, and I just think that was really important to add that he modeled that for me. And the admiration for God's creation, he always took the time to appreciate what God created. He really had a green thumb. He loved flowers and trees and everything. If you've ever been to the house, that's the first thing he would do. He would give you a tour of the yard, of all the different flowers in the garden and everything that he planted. Yep. That was his prized possession, was his flowers, and so it took it really allowed me, or modeled to me, that how do I explain it? Like I find myself now even in doing the same thing. I'll be sitting there watching the trees turn, and I'm like, wow, like this is, God created this, And I think sometimes that we get so busy, and we miss that, But He took the time to admire everything, and I find myself doing the same thing. It's not something that He specifically told me to do. It wasn't, but he modeled it to me. A lot of the stuff that I learned from them, it wasn't from what they said to me. It was what they modeled and what I saw them doing. And so the next point is also true to that too. So solitude, the art of solitude, because I think solitude's an art. Try getting 30 minutes away from any distractions. He always had an office that he would study in. I would always see him down there. That's where he studied in his devotionals, and it was all the time. It was regular, and that's where he taught me how to study the Bible, and that's where he laid that foundation of this is what you do, and he always used to say, don't just read it, but study it, and so that's where I learned the technique that he used and all that, how to study. And so I still do the same technique, and so unfortunately 2 years ago they did pass away, but with the grief and everything that that I found myself in, because we were super close, our family was super close with them, and I found myself that I drew closer unto the Lord, that instead of going away. A lot of people, draw away from the Lord when times of grief.
Right.
But because of the foundation that they taught me, I drew closer. And so I leaned on God for that. And and so now I'm heading into the ministry and to impact the next generation. But it was because of the foundation and the initiative that they took to tell me about Jesus that I'm able to do that. So.
That's a pretty remarkable story. You said your grandparents modeled and was an example to you. And a few minutes ago you said, when I was 8, in my 8-year-old brain, I somehow decided that I wanted to give my life to Jesus. Like everything, like I remember your grandpa teaching Rangers. Royal Rangers is our Wednesday night boys ministry.
Yep.
And he taught, but you went to his class. I suggested once he put you in your own class.
Yep.
He didn't, that wasn't happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if Bill decided something wasn't happening, it wasn't happening.
Yeah.
I said, we have a class for kids his age. He's like, his class for kids his age is with me. And I'm like, okay, that's the way it'll be then. And I watched him unload you out of your car seat from his truck and till where you were unloading him.
Yep.
Those last days.
Mm-hmm.
And that example, what would you say to grandparents today? And Bill was actually your great-grandparent.
Yeah.
Bill and Ann.
Yep.
But what would you say today to the grandpas and grandmas that we have here in relation to their grandkids?
I would say that sometimes you feel like you don't have as much of a voice because you're the grandparent. You don't have as much of a say, but I would almost argue that you have more of an impact than parents do with your faith. For example, like a kid may talk back to their mom and dad, but they won't talk back to their grandparents. What you say carries a little bit more of weight and it's not just what you say, it's what you do. They did teach me a lot of things and from what they told me, but a lot of it is from what they modeled to me. So, I guess practice what you preach. You really need to model, how they should act.
I think it's interesting you say that you'll argue with your parents, but you won't argue with your grandparents.
Right.
And you didn't argue with Bill.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
There's a lot of influence
Yeah.
that grandparents have on their kids.
Yeah.
So what would you say to the teenager? You made time in your life. As you become a teenager, you get jobs, you get busy, you get involved in school, you start dating. Why did you make time to still connect with your grandparents when a lot of kids just kind of might forget grandma and grandpa around or keep going on with their busy life?
I think a lot of that was partially because we live so close, and our family is really family oriented, and so we just help one another. And so I always felt that one day they are going to pass away, and that you need to learn as much as you can from them. And obviously I have, I've learned a ton from them, so much that I can't remember it all, but yeah, so I would say that, take the time that while you have it, because, sometime, eventually you're not going to have it. So definitely take that opportunity to, while you have it.
I think your testimony is powerful, Brendan, because like you said, a lot of our testimonies are people who hit rock bottom, their life was an absolute disaster, and then they cried out to God, and God saved them. Thank God for that.
Yep.
But you didn't have that.
Right.
You said you kind of remember always being here.
Yep.
And that's my wife Wendy's testimony. She doesn't remember a time where she's like, oh man, I need God. My life is an absolute mess. Maybe a couple times in our marriage, but
yeah.
That was my fault. That was my fault. But growing up, she just grew up and gave her life to Jesus, and I think that is a powerful testimony. We all have our own story, and each one of our journeys is precious, and we can't judge other people's journeys, but what a blessing for you.
Right.
To have that and have such an influence, a godly influence on your life. What else would you say to a 19-year-old man in this world, which being a Christian is not like, everybody's not going to be like, yay, you're not going to serve yourself, you're going to serve Jesus. In fact, quite the opposite. You've been pretty bold with your faith. You've been continuing to grow in your faith. You've set a sight to go to Bible college, and you're going to get another degree, which God's going to use in the future, but you're still focusing on Bible college. Yeah. Where do you get that? I'm impressed by the motivation. Where do you get that motivation?
I think part of that is a stubbornness that I have gotten from my grandfather. And so, but I do think that it comes back to their foundation that they laid for me, their love for the Lord, and it modeled it for me. And so, it's just from my love for the Lord that I just can't get enough. I just keep coming back for more, and each time He fulfills me. But I would say that, you definitely got to be intentional with your faith. It's not just going to come. It's not just going to come natural, and so you definitely have to set aside the time and be disciplined with it. And sometimes, you have to make the hard decision of not doing things that you want to do, but ultimately it's for the best.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Going and doing 2 different degrees at the same time is definitely one of the most challenging things I've ever done. It's like you got to turn a switch.
You made it through Old Testament, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the toughest freshman class. You'll be good to go now.
Yeah. So I would say you just got to be intentional, set aside the time, and be disciplined with it. Not going to be easy, but it's doable.
How could you encourage not just grandparents, but even parents that struggle with faith and struggle with issues of faith as it relates to their example to their kids? Anything you want to say?
I would say go back to the foundations, because if you build your house and you don't have a solid foundation, the house is just going to crumble. And so you need to have a strong foundation. And so it may be taking and setting aside the time, 30 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, and reading a chapter or two. Some chapters aren't very long, so you can get them done in 10 minutes, and you can pray about it, and you can. There's different ways. You don't have to spend 3 hours just studying the same thing. There's different tactics and stuff to study, and so with whatever time that your schedule or whatever allows. But I also think it's important to take the time to pray with your kids, and do, it's the stereotypical, pray before the meals, pray before bed, like it's almost like a Christmas movie, or not a Christmas movie, but a Christian movie, where you see the parents praying before bed and stuff. It's those little things that actually mean the most. It's not the big things that you do. It's the little things. It's the little habits that they see you have. And so, yeah, you may not necessarily get to church every week, and some things are hard, but it's important that you do the little things consistently, and then the big things will come. So that would be my encouragement. Focus on the little things.
So you told some good stories there, Of all the time you had with your grandparents, can you think of one time that probably deeply touched you the most?
Oh gosh. Um,
Kind of on the spot, I
yeah, a
think.
little bit on the spot here.
Yeah. Where you were moved inside like, God is real, because of what you saw or experienced with your role models.
I would say that a lot of it it's not necessarily stories. A lot of it is just what they did to each other. It's how they interacted with everyone. You could tell them and express any need to any of them, either one of them, and they would meet that need. And I think it is just that consistent, just laying down their life for everyone. Whatever they need, they would meet that need. And so I think it's just an overall like accumulation of that no matter what, they would always come through. They were always servants. It didn't matter their mood. It didn't matter their circumstances. They met people's needs whenever they could. So I think it's just accumulation of those that is what had the biggest impact on me. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, if I had a buck for every time I listened to your grandpa and grandma talk about you, this church would be paid off.
Yeah.
They're very proud of you, and we honor your family and are blessed that some of them are still here today, and I know how proud they are of you. And it's been exciting to watch you grow up, and it's exciting to get a front row seat on what God is doing in your life now and the future that you have ahead of you. So, bless you, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. You're a good young man. We appreciate you. Give Brendan a hand, would you?